Hi, this is Sharon. Um, some of us may be great at having difficult conversations, or at least we think we are. Some of us know we struggle with these conversations. Most important is that we communicate effectively, and we hope to provide some helpful suggestions for doing that this evening. Most of us shy away from all types of conflict for a lot of different reasons. And as a result, don't get the reaction or results we're seeking out of a conversation or a situation. It can be messy. However, we all know that conflict is inevitable. Most of us enter with positive intentions, and that's very important to remember. The goal should not be to create additional strife, but to figure out a way that both parties can find satisfaction when a decision is reached. You've all probably thought about this list before, and as an advisor, you'll come in contact with many different personalities. It's not always apparent that a conflict may arise, but it's good to be prepared. Being caught off guard makes us react in ways that are not conducive to good decision making. Realizing that conflict can arise over the simplest of situations, being thoughtful of our words and actions at all times is important. You may find yourself in conversation or possibly even conflict with parents. Since we know that most parents only have one side, their daughter's side of the story, it helps to let them know that you're more than happy to talk with their daughter to clarify any concerns. Sometimes the most difficult conversation we have with parents is to let them know that our conversations must be held with the member, not the member's parents. As an advisor, you'll meet with your officer, you'll interact with other members, you'll hear the good, the bad, and the ugly about a lot of things like the facility, the food, the house director, headquarters, house board, and advisory board members. Just like the members of the chapter, there will be many different personalities of members for both house and advisory boards. It's important to recognize that the two may not always see eye to eye, but by developing a supportive relationship among board members, if there are conflicts, everyone will be more open to listening and problem solving. And then with these last two groups, it's important that you know that there are fraternity officers and specialists available to assist with Panhellenic and university officials. Our role as advisors is to direct our officer to the appropriate fraternity officer or specialist for guidance. So, you'll notice that we're talking about crucial conversations. And when we do have conflict, we want to be prepared. So what makes a conversation turn to what we are going to refer to this evening as crucial versus typical? Well, first, opinions vary. There may be different sides that view a situation. The stakes are high, and emotions are involved. Okay, let's move the slide. Thank you. How do we typically handle crucial conversations? Well, we can't avoid them, that's for sure. We can face them and handle them poorly. Neither one of those is the best solution, because if we avoid them, we're not settling anything. And if we face them and handle them poorly, sometimes we make the situation worse. Or we can face them and handle them well. And we're hoping that this evening we'll give you some suggestions about how to handle them in a way that allows for conversations to be meaningful. So, why don't those crucial conversations go well? Anytime we've been in a situation where the conversation isn't going as we hope, emotions can get in the way, and we realize that. Our bodies physically react. We're under pressure. We need a solution, or we need an answer, or we need something a problem to be solved, and if we're not focused and thinking through the situation before we get to it, then we surely are under pressure. Sometimes we're just stumped. Maybe we've talked about it for too long and we don't know exactly where to go from here, and we're just stumped. And then we act in ways that are self-defeating. So why is it important to master crucial conversation skills? Well, we're hoping to improve our organization. Had a little interference there, so sorry. Improve our organization, improve our relationships. We hope to revitalize our community. And by that, if you'll think about your chapter council, or you'll think about your advisory board or house board, if you can get to those crucial conversations and master them, then it truly does revitalize your community. It helps you see that those difficult conversations can be had, and they're very positive. And then it also improves your personal health, because we know that when we dread those conversations or when we put them off, it really doesn't do anything to help us. And before I turn this over to Leslie, who has done much work with crucial conversations, and I'm just so excited to have her present this. She talked to us about it at a regional directors meeting, and we found it to be so helpful that we wanted to share it with others. Certainly, you can look down this list and see where you might use a conversation, certainly related to your to chapter work with women, or to advisory board or house board, but you can also see that some of these topics could fit into your daily life, and we hope that those will benefit you as well. Certainly, too, that I would point out here are facility rules and regulations, because we know that whenever women are living together, sometimes following the rules and having conversations about the facility is difficult, and also with financial responsibility when it comes to paying our bills. Those are two sensitive topics, and we just hope that this list will give you some suggestions as to where you might use that. And before my daughter wanders through again, or the dog, I'm going to turn this over to Leslie.
Thank you, Sharon. All right, everyone. So as Sharon has so kindly set this up, so when we're talking about having these conversations, we want to go into these extremes of entering the conversations uncomfortably in the right reaction style and get to the middle, which is what I refer to here on this slide as the pool of shared meaning. So that's kind of the happy place where we kind of collectively, collaboratively get together and get to a resolution. When we share the words silence and violence that you see on the screen, right, we're not necessarily talking about them in the literal sense, or we hope. Here we're referring to our brain's choice to decide to be brutally honest or be respectful, and to remove that fight or flight feeling that we all have due to a rush of adrenaline and times that we're uncomfortable. We often ignore the option of actual dialogue, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, how to get to that dialogue place. The pool of shared meaning is where we're sharing our concern, and we're focusing on what we are looking to get out of the situation without becoming across as attacking or being uncomfortable, but making it a safe place for both yourself and the other person, as well as opening ourselves up to their side of things. So first, in order to do that and get to that pool of shared meaning, you've got to get unstuck. So the first and foremost place is you've got to really think about what's making you stuck or what's keeping you in that place where maybe you can't initiate the conversation or you're too worried about it going to that extreme, and so you kind of just do nothing. So we want to talk a little bit about holding the right crucial conversation with CPR. And for our friends out there in the medical field, probably not the CPR that you were thinking of. But here we're going to talk about content, pattern, and relationships. And when you think about conversations where you've gotten stuck in the past and reflect why, think about, was it maybe you weren't really listening to begin with? Maybe you weren't really concerned about the other person's thoughts and feelings? Was it a single one-time problem? That's a content problem. Was it an ongoing issue, which we refer to as a pattern? Or is it something that's a relationship problem? And these can sometimes be the most difficult because they're the most personal. So we got to start in the right place. And we got to do what we call start with the heart, right? So that's starting with us as that individual. And you'll see the bullet, work on me first, right? So what that really means is, how do you want to show up in this conversation? So are you thinking of your typical reaction style and how you typically enter a conversation? Meaning, do you kind of go to that aggressive side, maybe defensive? Maybe you're the type of person that's a little more shy, or maybe it comes across as meek. So you've got to think about that first, right? Then you've got to focus on what you really want to have happen in this conversation. So are you acting, like how are you putting it out there? Like what are you acting like you want out of it? What are you portraying to the other person? So thinking about what I really want out of this for myself, for others, for the relationship, and how would I behave if I really did want this? Would it be different? And then lastly, thinking about when we talk about refusing the sucker's choice, which is what do I not want the outcome to be, right? So how should I go about getting what I really want, and most importantly, avoiding what I don't want to happen? So we've got to look for these cues, right? We've got to look for when this conversation becomes what we're referring to as crucial, right? When does it take that turn? From going from a typical, maybe even slightly uncomfortable conversation to where this person is completely reacting, maybe not how you anticipated. So you've got to look for those silence or violence cues, right? So, from yourself, right? So thinking about, am I going into a silence, meaning am I retreating into my conversation? I'm really not maybe voicing my concerns, not really sharing my intended purpose or where this was all beginning, or are you going to violence, right? Are you getting upset? Are you getting flustered, where then you yourself just start to shut down as well? And so looking for your own style, right? So this helps like if you know where you go in these uncomfortable conversations, this really helps where you're automatically going to revert to when things get a little tense. And this will help you in knowing that, planning ahead to keep perspective on the conversation. And so I want you guys to think for a second while we're together tonight and think about a situation that you've recently had, or maybe you're anticipating. This could be in your work life, this could be in your personal life, this could be in your CAPA role, where this has happened, right? You felt it, and maybe things could have gone in a different way. Based on some of these things that we're talking about, and I want you to think about this situation in your head as we walk through these next few slides. So we talked about making it safe, right? Which, when you're in the conversation, or maybe you're anticipating, kind of pre-planning. So I think first and foremost, right, when we talk about making it safe for you guys to have a conversation together, for these two parties to engage. And so sometimes, right, we need to just apologize or throw that out there when we need to. If you've hurt somebody's feelings, apologize. But to offer a sincere apology, your motives have to change. Don't just say sorry to say sorry. We have all heard that, felt that, and know how that feels. Sometimes you've got to give up saving face or being right or winning in order to focus on your end goal and really what you're looking for out of the situation. So when we talk about contrasting to fix misunderstandings, right? That's kind of just a big way to share that sometimes people feel disrespected, even though you have said nothing to disrespect them or their point of view. But we have to address that, right? You've got to get that out there that you had no bad intention, you meant nothing, inappropriate, and get that out of the way and move it to the side, because it's important to remember that acknowledging their feelings, right? So acknowledging that, listen, I know you may have felt this way, however, this is really what I anticipated or this is what I intended. That doesn't mean you're apologizing to them, right? It's rather a better way to take back the fact that we've hurt somebody's feelings. So again, you can continue your path to resolving whatever issue that you have. And that's kind of where we're talking about kind of walking into that pooled shared pool of meaning, So working towards that goal, right? To keep that conversation going versus to have it cut off or stop because somebody retreats into their defensive mode or their quiet mode. And most importantly, right, we've got to create mutual purpose. So sometimes when we're in a situation where there are clearly different purposes, and that's okay, right? So the saying, let's agree to disagree, doesn't necessarily apply in this setting. Here, the mutual purpose is about finding a way to agree to agree. And this is tough because you have to let go that your thought process is the only way and the best way, right? And we all get trapped into that very easily when we have our own agendas. We have to open our minds to the fact that there maybe is a third choice, right? And it's the choice that actually suits everybody. And I think here, this is, a great piece, right? Bottom line is we know if we don't talk it out in one way or another, we're going to act it out, which never leads to a good place. So we talk a little bit about this slide, and I'm going to spend some time here. We talk about kind of stating your path. And what this is kind of the really gateway to open the dialogue and start whatever crucial conversation you feel that you need to have. So we're going to use an example here of the event chairman advisor needing to address late event paperwork. Some of you on this call can totally, absolutely amend to this. And so we're going to talk about event paperwork being late, which is putting the chapter at risk for canceled events and potential risk management issues, to show how we pull the skills together that we've discussed and begin approaching a situation that could turn to a crucial or emotional conversation very quickly if we didn't enter it with any really strategy or thought process of where we want this conversation to land or to end. So when we talk about kind of breaking this thing up into facts, a story, an ask, and a talk, right? So what this is we talk about, you want to enter the conversation amicably, right? So something as simple as like, hey, do you have some time to talk? Hey, when can we get together? Just very casual, right? But then also, typically, right, if you say to somebody, hey, do you have some time to talk? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, oh, of course, right? So as you begin this conversation, you need to have some facts, right, behind what you're talking about or what your concern is. So if you open the dialogue with, hey, listen, I'm aware of some issues we've had recently with events not getting approved from the regional risk management specialist until the last minute, right? That's a fact. That's happened. There's nothing personal about it. There's nothing about other people involved. It's just, hey, this has happened. The last 2 times we've communicated about this, you've shared this would not continue, but unfortunately it has, right? So again, another fact. That's not a feeling, that's not an emotion, it's just what occurred. And then we kind of walk into the story phase, right? So again, sharing as the event advisor, this leads me to think that maybe you don't understand the risk that this puts the chapter at for not having events and the larger picture of the entire group being impacted. Right? So it's, again, sharing, here's what could be happening. Maybe you're just not aware of that. And then there's an ask, right? So can you help me better understand why this continues to occur? Is there something that I can help you with? So this is where then you're opening that dialogue at this point and thinking about how this is kind of laid out. That person, that event advisee on the other end, the event chairman, she's already got her guard down, right? Even if she was thinking, oh gosh, my advisor, like she's talking to me, she's got these issues with me, I'm so nervous, or I'm angry, or whatever the case is, right? Approaching it in this manner really leaves you to a place where she's pretty defenseless, if you will, because there's no reason for her to be, because we've shared, hey, here's the concern, here's what potentially could happen, right, if we don't get this together, and how can I better help you, right? So really opening that dialogue for her to share ways, and we may uncover some root causes that are delaying the paperwork getting in, or maybe an understanding with the whole contract process, what have you, right? And then as a wrap up, right, at that point, there will clearly be some good dialogue there. And then as a wrap up, right, kind of just sharing, hey, listen, I think what we should do is make sure we set expectations for you and your committee and commit to a specific turnaround time for you in advance of the 3-week deadline for the EPF. How do you feel about that? Chances are she's going to feel pretty good about that, right? Because she feels like you've helped her, she feels like you approached her in the right manner, and probably, like I said, you were able to probably uncover a couple of things that might have been the root cause to eliminate this problem go forward. And I think when you think about this, right, you want to be thinking as an individual, am I really open to other people's views? Because it would be very easy to go into this like, oh, so irritated, why does this keep happening? I just don't understand why these women can't be organized and have things on their calendar. That would have taken you to a completely different place in that conversation. So you've really got to think about, am I really open to what's happening with somebody else? And also, am I addressing the real issue? Because it's so easy to get sidetracked, and that's where that fact component comes in. And you want to make sure that you're really confidently expressing your own views, right? Am I avoiding unnecessary disagreement is what you want to be thinking about. And again, it's sticking to the facts and sticking to the openness of how can I help you type of mindset really takes that unnecessary disagreement component pretty much out of the picture. And so we use the example of the event chairman for the purpose of our conversation tonight, but this, as you guys know as advisors with us this evening, could easily be applied to multiple conversations that we have with all different advisees, all different officers. A couple that come to mind would be, the vice president of organization and submitting her calendar report, or maybe planning for a leadership consultant visit. The vice president of standards and her communication with a fraternity, maybe getting her minutes and probation report submitted on time to the appropriate parties, maybe the chapter president working through Panhellenic issues, maybe the house chairman signing the housing contracts. We could apply this across the board. And so after having these conversations, right, and approaching it and being strategic in how we kind of place things out, we of course need to move to action, right? Because there has to be follow-up. We can't expect to hold this type of conversation with anybody, right? In whatever life, right? Whether it's work life, capital life, personal life, and just move on and expect that that's going to be the end of it, because we all know how that works, right? It will likely continue if we don't have some next steps put into place. So really thinking about how are we going to make these decisions together, who's going to do what and by when to get some commitment, and then how are we going to follow up? So when we're headed into these uncomfortable situations or conversations, either by avoiding or being ready to attack, it's really due to anticipating the other person's reaction, right? So if you kind of start to think about that in a little different way. So we really take that power away in that piece of the conversation by focusing on us, right? And first asking, what do we really want to accomplish here? How do we want to get there? And this is best done by understanding our own style, right? So understanding where we go when things get a little tense or a little uncomfortable. Again, how do we come across to others? And I think that the important piece about here, just to take a pause, is that when you think about that, right, saying that, we do this by understanding our own style, that's how we best get there and accomplish our goals, we own control over that conversation in that moment, right? So by our actions, we're going to dictate how that conversation goes by knowing how we're going to respond. And I think this improves overall communication, of course, but brings us to that pool of shared meaning, which is all about keeping the conversation moving and all parties engaged for the goal of solution, right? So it keeps you moving past that uncomfortable phase and keeps you moving. So a couple tips, right? tips and tricks to the trade, right, are first and foremost, this is easier said than done for myself included, right? Listen and don't interrupt. Not blaming other parties, right? That so easily becomes an easy out, I think, for both parties. Really determining the problem. And I think that goes back to really planning and making sure that your conversation doesn't get diverted or sidestepped by sticking to those facts and bringing a couple of solid examples to the table, so to speak, when you're having these conversations. Focusing on the issue, not your feelings, right? And that can so easily be derailed, right? When we're emotional people by nature. And so, but really sticking to the facts and not letting your emotions kind of get the best of you and controlling that in the moment. And knowing your style of communication and reaction, right? So knowing that, like we mentioned in the last slide, really allows you to have control over the conversation and where you're looking to be your end game. And don't force compliance, right? We all know how that works. It never does. So instead of forcing compliance, we need to develop a common agreement with us and the other party. Remember, right? It's not a competition. We've got to develop those areas of agreement together. That's how we're going to get there and have a lasting relationship and lasting results. And if only one person's needs are met, it's not a resolution. And so, hopefully from a standpoint of, obviously, we don't have the opportunity to spend a lot of time together and go through a lot of different situations, but hopefully in thinking strategically about a particular situation or something that you anticipate may come up, we've given you a little bit of food for thought, a little bit of opportunity to think about something differently and a way to approach it, really for everyone's shared needs. So a couple of different resources as we wrap up together. Of course, right, in our Kappa world, our fraternity and chapter documents are a great go-to, especially when we're looking for those fact pieces, right? Great references. Depending on your situation, you may need to reference your university student code of conduct, depending on what situation you're dealing with within the chapter. And then I've listed to the book Crucial Conversations. And this is what we really centered it a lot around to Kappa, but really pulled a lot of the thought processes and strategies from this book. So it's a great read if you guys have a chance or are interested in learning more. And of course, if you have questions or comments, Sharon and I are always available, and we've listed our emails there. And so with that, Sam, I think I'll turn it over to you to see if we have any questions. Sam, are you out there?
Sorry, I thought I had myself unmuted and I didn't. So there's no questions right now. And I think we've probably given you guys enough time to go ahead and type them into the panel. If you have questions that come up after this, Sharon and Leslie are certainly available. Oh, here's one. Here's one right now. Yay. What's the best way to address chapter council or the chapter as a whole where there is a difficult issue to address? So meaning a group as opposed to an individual person. This is from Betsy.
So I think probably not to give the great generic answer, but I think it would completely depend on what the issue was. And Sam and Sharon, feel free to chime in as well. I would definitely, depending on what the situation is, I think you could still kind of apply the same strategies or tactics, if you will, and just cater it a little bit better to your audience. Meaning, so I think that's where, depending on the situation, really sticking to and having some good examples of, so listen, here's some things that I wanted to share with you guys or wanted to have a conversation with you as a large group, and then kind of bullet point those couple of pieces of concern, and then really ask, depending on the situation, of course, and hopefully, I'm sure it'll be appropriate for the whole group, but um, kind of going back and asking them, so what are your thoughts here? Why is this happening? And open that dialogue to maybe hopefully get to the root of the problem in order to move on.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think in those group settings, everybody can feel attacked so easily. And I was sitting here thinking about the violence or silence, and I think even more important maybe in a large group setting or in a smaller group setting is that you have your emotions under control, because we know there, if we have a difficult situation, there are going to be opposing views and different sides maybe even, and going into those conversations being aware of that and trying to you know, be that person who is listening to both sides, I think is just so much more important in that group setting.
Yeah, and I think Sharon, to that point, kind of acknowledging it, right? So, like, I understand that you are clearly expressing some concern. I'd like you to listen to X, Y, and Z, right? And see if that doesn't diffuse that a little bit. And again, I think that goes into kind of knowing what your natural gut reaction typically is in those settings to be able to control that. So even if you're feeling something different on the inside, right? Maybe what you're portraying is a little more calm and collected, a little more controlled, which will allow not the emotion to run. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. Is Betsy's response. Does anybody else have any questions for Sharon and for Leslie? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and close for this evening. Thank you, Sharon and Leslie, both for presenting tonight. This was awesome. I think about how I'll use this at work, besides for my Kappa stuff as well. So it was an awesome presentation. As we close the webinar tonight, there will be a few questions, a little poll that will open up on your screen, and we appreciate if you would take the time to answer those before you leave us for the night. It helps us to determine future educational needs and programming needs for the webinar series moving forward. Thank you, everybody, and I appreciate you spending your time with us tonight.